You are listening to the Dave Sweetmore Show, and I'm joined by absolute rock royalty, a rock legend, Francis Rossi. Francis, how are you doing?
I'm good. Rock legend royalty. It's all going on there, isn't it, really? Just the bloke in Status Quo would have been fine, honestly.
Listen, it's almost 60 years since you formed the band that was to become Status Quo. The last 12 months you've had no touring. It's the longest time off you've ever had. How have you coped? Have you kept yourself busy?
Well, yeah, it's the longest we've been off since September 2019, and we won't go back until February 22, so that's the longest ever. And I coped like everybody else. Initially, I came home from the Talk Tour on the 10th of March last year, and it was like it's like the school had burnt down and we couldn't go to school, and I thought, yay! I thought it was really great. And then I painted some sheds in the garden, painted some furniture in the garden, painted a few rooms, and let my exercise thing go. And then I started sitting in the garden doing crosswords a bit. And then slowly, I did an album with a cousin of mine, or cousin's husband, which was most enjoyable. But it's only this year, subsequently, I've kind of got that, I suppose like everybody else. I don't know if I want to get back to stuff. I think I've got locked down lazy, but I'm kind of fed up hearing about COVID and seeing masks and be careful, wash your hands nicely. Everyone loves everything. I'm just kind of fed up with it, and I'd rather they turn the page now from that human point of view of purely fed up. But other than that, I've been fine. I'm still alive, I think, unless I'm dreaming.
Well, I want to talk more about that album you did with Leo Bryan in a minute, but last time we spoke, it was a couple of years ago. You'd just done the We Talk Too Much album with Hannah Ricard. You were about to start the I Talk Too Much tour. You were about to announce the release of the Backbone album. When all of that came to a full stop, how did it make you feel to, have all that planned and then all of a sudden not be able to do it?
Bit of a shame for the Backbone album, because it was very successful, and then we wanted to tour it, which obviously gets more mileage, I suppose, out of it. And the way albums and the way records generally sell these days for everybody, it's a complete difference than it ever used to be. So you have to do far more promotion and far more to sell. It would seem a fraction of the records that the one used to sell, and you have to try and work on getting streams and all that kind of. And I'm old enough, obviously, to like hard copy, whether it's a CD or a 7-inch record or a 12-inch record. The idea that most of the stuff that you try and promote is out in the ether. It's just something on someone's phone. There is no copy of anything. So I find that difficult, and that was, although we sold quite a few albums, 100,000 or so, I think, the Hannah Ricard one we did, 10 or 12,000, which, again, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, would have been more in pieces. And it sounds a bit like corporate and so on, but the fact we don't sell hard copy pieces anymore, to me, is weird. So everything's in the ether, everything's in cyber, because where does it exist? So the music in that respect doesn't exist anymore, other than on digits. You can't hold that, as much as people have it on their telephone. It's not like people in my generation, perhaps your generation, the couple back, where they have record collections and they like them, we look at them, we keep them, we have them, they're a tangible thing. We are working in that world that has none of that. So that in itself is very, very strange. And it was, I said, a bit of a pain to stop Backbone in the midst of everything. But we will be doing the Backbone material when we go out and do the out quoing next year. So I'm getting confused where we are. We're still that'll be. We will do most of the set we used to do, and we will have new stuff from the Backbone album. So it's just where we will be. So again, like everybody, it'll all be uncharted territory. When we do come out of this, we all know we've never been there before. Although everyone's saying let's go back to normal, it won't go back to that. It'll be something else, won't it? Whatever way we do it, it's going to be post-COVID. Whether there's going to be financial problems from that with the financial world, whether we're going to have a recession, I don't know. All those things we are all aware of. So there will be it will be post-COVID. And the sooner it's post, the better.
I agree. I've got to agree with you totally. One of the things you mentioned, Francis, was that during lockdown, you've got involved with your cousin's husband, Leo Bryan. I've been speaking to Lee a lot, and the album he's brought out is brilliant. This Is Me. It came out at the beginning of June. What made you decide to agree to get involved with that?
Well, I've obviously known Lee some time, and some years ago he wanted me to look at a few of his songs and see what I thought. Yeah, fine. And you know, I have this thing as a drummer. I make the jokes about it, but it's a drummer and it's my cousin's husband. And then he asked if he could use the studio to do stuff. Well, certainly, no problem at all. You pay our engineer and you can have the studio free of charge. And he came in with a couple of songs, and I sort of tried doing it, this, do that, do this, do that, and then I got quite interested in it. And then I was surprised at how well he sang. I thought, oh. And it was a lesson for me, I suppose, that we make judgments on however I'd made a judgment. It's my cousin's husband. I don't know who you are. And then suddenly sing, I thought, oh. And then I watched him play drums. I thought, oh. And I suppose I'd made an unfair judgment. But I enjoyed doing the first couple of 3 tracks with him. And my cousin did some back vocals on it, which I really liked. And then he said, well, you want to try writing a couple with me? I said, well, I don't mind. And the point being, he said, well, you've already helped me through stuff. So we started writing a few, and then we ended up with 10 or 12 tracks or whatever they were, and I really, really enjoyed it. Are they any good or not? I don't know. But I find that with all music in the last 15 years, perhaps, you always assume they were great when we were younger because we sold so many records. But now I don't know. I don't know. I just like them. It's like when people ask me what favourite record, favourite gig, favourite movie. One favourite movie? One favourite song? Well, I don't think so. But I really, really enjoyed doing it. And he's talking about doing something again later this year, if possible. But they're still working on that one. And going back to what I said with the current climate that we're in, apart from COVID, is the climate of the record industry and the rock industry or pop, whatever you want to call it, is that it's different than it was. So the idea of working an album is a lot longer than it used to be. I was talking to a lady in Germany that's a record company, a friend of mine, and she was saying now she's been moved to a department that actually just continually starts working product records that would have been, years ago, past, finished now, that one. Well, she said now, because most people have not heard an album, whatever they may have taken 2 or 3 tracks, and that's their entire catalogue, I suppose. So that most people will not have heard the rest of an album. It's not like it was that people would sit down and listen to an album after buying it for 2 tracks. That doesn't happen anymore. People take the 2 tracks they want and don't venture to look, usually. And so there's an entire department. So I'm thinking with Lee's album that they'll continually work it. We see what happens with that. But to answer your question, a most enjoyable project, and we will probably do another one.
Do you know what? It's a great album, and like I said, I've been speaking to Lee a lot, and This Is Me, the album, it is out now. And one of the things I love about it is, as a fan of your work over the years, I can hear your influence, yet at the same time, when you listen to the lyrics, it's obviously very personal to Lee as well.
Yes, I think. I mean, that could be a criticism, and one about his mother and one about his brother, I believe. One was a drug issue, his brother, and he lost his mother, and I've never been quite that person, I don't think. But generally, as I said, the album, if you think it's great, then that's really lovely. You just hope the more people get to hear it. And going back to what I said about that record company executive, she said that is the problem, is getting people to hear it rather than this new product, and they'll go for 2 tracks from another album, 2 tracks from whether it's just that I'm old and you can't take it back to them when people would sit and listen to an album. But I think it's a very good album, but I would say that.
It is. Well, it's brilliant, and we'll look forward to hopefully more coming from Lee, especially if you're working with him as well.
I hope so, yeah.
Now, one thing I want to mention, you picked up on it before, is that I Talk Too Much tour, your spoken word tour, it had to stop in March last year. You're going to be picking that up again in June right through to September. Do you think that the lockdown will have changed your outlook look on that tour much. Can we expect any stories that perhaps we might not have heard before the pandemic?
I don't know. Maybe it's a very good question. I wouldn't have thought of that. But what tends to happen, and what tended to happen initially, is I had an idea of where we would go, a basic structure. Because I didn't want it too formatted. If it gets too formatted, I write a set list out, and that's what you do. Whereas there's a sketch of a set list, if you like, and then we go from that. And then certain things, I'd go off at tangents some nights, well, most nights, and Mick would say, "Well, we're going to overrun," and we overrun, and then you get different things come up each night. So perhaps, I don't know, you may get stories about me writing, painting furniture in the garden, or this pigeon that we have sitting beside me on the floor. My daughter saved this pigeon some years ago, and that kind of story may get in there. So it's very much a suck it and see. You sit down, and one of the joys of the talk tour for me is I walk out, I smile because the people make me smile, and then I sit down and we go, whoa. We start where I was born, and then it just goes where it's going to go. I do a couple of tunes and try and explain why I think Status Quo ended up doing so many sort of bluesy-ish shuffles, or why it ended up as a pop, country, blues, rock band, which I think it is, and some people want it to be purely rock, and some people want it to be heavy metal, and some people want it, excuse me, and it's all of those, and that's what I like about Status Quo. It's all of those things. So,
it's a great tour. I came to see it in Preston, and I'm coming to Stockport. I think it's in July, so really, really, looking forward to it. And you do tell some great stories, of what's been an amazing life.
Well, I hope some more come out. As I said, when I talk about it on radio, I get a bit, I can't think of anything. It's a classic thing in interviews over the years, radio, TV, and news media, papers and such. They would ask us, even when Rick was alive, they say, "Have you got any interesting anecdotes?" And we both go, no. You can never think of anything off the cuff like that. And quite often we would be 2 hours down the road, so we could have told them that, or I get that at night. But on the talk tour, because there is only me, if I go down a tangent, I tend to pick up, this leads me to. Whereas if you're in a band, or if there's two of us, the one won't let the other drift at a tangent, because it initially feels, don't go there, where are you going? You don't know where you're going. And to me, that's what I kind of like. It drifts somewhere, and then someone in the audience might say something positive or negative, and can lead to a positive or negative result. And if it's negative, you get back off stage. I won't do that again. Messed up there. So I do very, very much enjoy doing that stuff. Very much. When I go back to work, which is what I call Status Quo, there's a set list, and we walk on, and from that point you really are, okay, this is going to be, it's a graft in that thing. And so you take it to that end of the result you're trying to get it to, and it's physically hard work. With the talk tour, it's kind of la 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 la. That's the feeling inside of me, and it's very, very pleasant to be there. And he talks a lot. Have you noticed?
It's great, isn't it? So you finish the I Talk Too Much tour, and then February next year you're back out with the band for the Out Quo tour. You mentioned earlier on that it'll be almost 2 years since you did the Backbone album. You said you're going to do all the the usual Quo stuff, and you're going to do some tracks off the Backbone album. One thing that all the fans are going to want to know is, after the success of the Backbone album, once the tour's out of the way next year, can we expect any more new music from the band?
Being honest, I don't think so, because, as I said, the way the state of everything is, and I find it very... It's hard to do it and feel as enthused about it. Well, I said that before, that I wouldn't do it, but I might do, but I can't really see the point. And I just wanted the band to make that album, but we'll see. It could be another year or 2 years away yet, so it might be quite refreshing to make an album. So I don't really know the answer to that question, but my gut feeling is kind of no. And I think there has to be a point where you just say, well, we draw a line under that. It doesn't mean we aren't Status Quo. It means that... And I do read lots of negatives about Francis Rossi and Friends, which is a bit of an insult to John and Andrew and the other two. But John and Andrew, you have to remember that John was brought into the band by Rick. So the idea that Rick's now gone and it's FR and Friends is very hurtful to them. and to all of us, and tend to think, well, we'll leave it then. It's a bit of a childish response, but there we are. To answer the question, I don't really know. I'm not sure how I'd feel by the end of that, so maybe.
Does the thought of going back out on the road with a band after so long off again excite you? Is it something you look forward to?
I've been looking forward to it so bloody long that it's kind of sort of takes the sort of luster off it, but I look forward to the overall thing. I'm more frightened at the moment of rehearsal, which will be the longest rehearsal perhaps we'd ever had, and I'm actually even starting now trying to get my physicality back up to that, and cardiovascular and such, and I've added riding a bike and a couple of walks a day and a swim a day and so many hundred crunches a day, anything to get that. Everyone says I'm looking well and really well, I'm not on any medication, all those things old people generally are, and there's old people in show business too. So that the biggest worry for me is getting past the first few shows. If they find, then I'll enjoy the rest of the year, so to speak. But at the moment, it's like, I don't know. It's the unknown. Normally, we'd have been off 3 weeks. The worst we would ever take off is probably 2 months around about Christmas. And then we go back, and that's how it's been for 400 or 500 years now. And so just going back this time is going to be a learning curve, perhaps. I don't know. As I said, never been to this point before. Never been 72 before. And
do you know what though? You do look after yourself. You still sound great. You still look good. Are you feeling good?
Yeah, I do. I feel very good in that. I still in the morning think, oh God, I do enjoy being asleep. Which I just went to this acupuncturist I go and see, and so I do enjoy being asleep. And I wake up thinking, oh, lovely, and which is the feeling I used to get when I used to take downers to sleep. But it's after I've been up and had the second coffee, I can tell I know I've woken up and away I go. I get into the day again and get into the routine again, and then I enjoy it. And each day goes by, and I find that's one of the things. I was talking to one of my sons that no matter what one does in life, it becomes. He said it's a bit of a groundhog day. I said, well, each morning I wake up in the bathtub, set up, have the coffee, I go and shower, the sound check, the show comes, we get off the bus. It has that rhythm to it, and it's a fine line, I suppose, between Groundhog Day and rhythm. But it's all Groundhog Day, and he made the point, yeah, but you're doing something you enjoy. And I made the point that, yeah, but it still can become the norm. But would I want to go back to some other norm? Probably not.
One other thing before I let you go, Francis, one other thing I want to pick up on is a day that it was quite a significant day for me as well, if I'm honest. This year on the 24th of September, it's 30 years since you did that amazing Rock Till You Drop day where you got the band in the Guinness Book of Records. You did 4 gigs in a day, Sheffield, Glasgow, Birmingham and London. Now, I remember I'd already become a fan of the band at that point, and I was born in 78, so I would have been 13 years old, and I was probably a little bit too young to appreciate Live Aid, but I think that was the first significant big event for me that I remember being obsessed with. 30 years on, what do you remember about the Rock Till You Drop day?
It hurt. And again, Rick and I were probably going through a dodgy spell, and our manager at the time, who probably wasn't the best in terms of what he did for the band, and because he put us through the suing the BBC, all lots of weird, silly things, and he obviously felt the band was all over. But we were in the office one day, and he said, do you reckon you could do 4 shows in a day? And we sort of, yeah, I suppose so. Didn't think about it much, and then the reality of it, having 4 separate sets of equipment and flying around in a helicopter in a private jet, having your lunch, and ending up at Wembley Arena about 10:30, 11 at night, feeling cream crackered, and it just became so. It was a good PR exercise. Did it sell any more records? I don't know, and I think our industry has become a little bit that way. That when you see Lady Gaga had the picture with the meat, everyone said, "What a silly woman! What a stupid thing to do!" But it got her on every single front page of every single newspaper on the planet. And so lots of things are being driven by that. So therefore, Rock Till You Drop, can you do that? Cause a bit of a stir. yeah, it did all that, and whether or not it sold more records or not, I don't know. So that's coming back to what we asked about whether Quo would do an album. People aren't buying them anymore, and not just the older people. Some of those, we all think the older people buy records all the time, but they're not there. They can't. And lots of the outlets for them are gone, and I don't know. It's a mixed up Francis Rossi you have this morning. I think you have it.
Do you know what? It was a great day, though, and like I say, as a 13-year-old who was already a fan of the band, it was a massively significant day in my life. I just remember.
Oh, it was a great day out, and it kind of went by. Sorry, I interrupted you again. But go on.
No, it was a great day, and it's one of my favourite albums of all time as well, from a personal point of view as well. So really, really, So do you think anything will be done to celebrate the 30 years, or is it something that's not been mentioned yet?
Some years ago, we're talking about that manager. We began to we celebrated when we first met Rick in '65. We celebrated something when he wasn't even in the band, and then we celebrated when Rick joined. Then we celebrated the first hit. Then we celebrated 10 years. So we had so many celebrations, and again, they were part of the something to hang a promo campaign on, and I got pissed off with all that. It drives you mad, which is why I wanted to make the Backbone album, that it would stand on its own as an album. It's just that, as I said, the whole market had changed us, so it's very hard to know, but it was a successful album. So I'd like to do, if we do an album, that it's on the album, not on the frigging campaign.
It was a great album, great to have Richie on the album as well, and as a fan of the band, it's like
very good boy. Yeah.
It is, even though Rick will never be forgotten ever, it's almost like a new generation, a new era for the band. That's how I look at it anyway.
Well, I think that really ought to be looked at that way, because it's like with the Stones. Some people think it was finished when Brian Jones died, or all those that people see in certain acts. I know it goes on, and they have similar trouble. But people are now saying about the band what they said about the band when Rick and I split from Alan and John, what we should and shouldn't do, and so on. And then when John, then when Alan went, and now that Rick's died, they can be very derogatory. But I try not to look anymore. So, but the trouble is, Richie or Leon, they go and say, people have said this. I said, don't fucking read it then. But it's too late. They've told me.
I'll tell you what, as a fan of the band, right, honestly, it's so good to have you still doing what you're doing, and we're going to support you forever. Do you know what I mean?
That's lovely.
Really is. But all the information about the I Talk Too Much tour and Outgoing tour is available on the Status Quo website. And going back to talking about the brilliant Leo Bryan album, which Francis has been involved with, all the information on that is at Leo Bryan Music all over the internet. But Francis, has always been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us. And good luck with everything.
Thank you. Take care. Cheers.